Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It happened on one of those quiet afternoons when the sun just begins to tilt toward the west, spreading a soft, honey-colored glow across the living room. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books, and the ticking of the clock on the mantel was the only sound between us. My grandson, Daniel, was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, building something with his old wooden blocks. He's 11, at that age where he's too grown up for cartoons, but still too young to stop asking questions about everything. I was sitting in my old armchair, the one my late husband used to call my thinking throne. I remember the way Daniel looked up at me that day, his eyes clearer and older than they should have been. There was something about that look that made me put down my knitting needles. I could feel that something was coming, though I didn't know what. "Grandma," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant, "do you ever get lonely?" That question took the air right out of me. Not because it was unexpected, children ask things all the time that make you think, but because of how he asked it. There was care in his tone, a kind of cautious love, like he already knew the answer and was afraid of hearing it said aloud. That I tried to laugh it off. "Oh honey, I have my garden, my books, and you coming around on weekends. How could I be lonely?" He didn't smile back. He just looked down at his hands, then back at me. "But that's not the same, is it? Having people around and not feeling alone, it's not the same thing." There was something in his words that hit me deeper than I expected. He wasn't wrong. After my husband passed, the days seemed to stretch longer than they used to. I'd fill the hours with chores or phone calls, but silence had a way of sneaking in, curling up next to me when the night got quiet. I watched Daniel's small hands pick up another wooden block and balance it carefully on top of his tower. "You're a smart one," I said, trying to sound playful. "Since when did you start thinking about things like that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I just notice stuff." We sat in silence for a while after that, the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. The afternoon light shifted again, and the room turned a little more golden, a little more fragile. When he finally spoke again, his words changed something in me. "Grandma," he said, "I think sometimes people need someone to listen to them, even if they say they're fine. Like you always listen to me." I can't explain what I felt in that moment. It wasn't sadness, exactly. It was something gentler, like realizing you'd been seen for the first time in a long while. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding inside, pretending everything was okay just because that's what grown-ups do. I got up from my chair and sat down beside him on the rug. "You're right," I said. "Everyone needs someone to listen." He looked surprised at first, then smiled, a shy, almost relieved smile. "Do you miss Grandpa a lot?" he asked. I nodded. "Every day. Some days it's quiet, some days it's loud. The missing part, I mean." He leaned closer and rested his small head on my shoulder. For a moment, I just sat there, feeling the warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was a simple thing, but it filled the cracks that had been in my heart for years. "Grandpa would have liked you," I whispered. He tilted his head up. "You think so?" "I know so," I said. "He would have built model airplanes with you, taken you fishing, told you all his terrible jokes." Daniel chuckled softly. "Mom says his jokes were really bad." "Oh, they were," I said, smiling. "But they made people laugh anyway." We talked for a while longer about Grandpa, about school, about how the old oak tree in the backyard still stands taller than the house. But somewhere in between his questions and my answers, I realized something. Daniel wasn't just trying to comfort me. He was trying to understand what it means to care for someone, to see someone beyond what they showed. As evening settled in, I made him some cocoa and turned on the old lamp beside my chair. The room looked the same as it always had, but it felt different, softer, alive somehow. Before he went to bed that night, Daniel hugged me tighter than usual. Then he said it, the thing I truly didn't expect. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to make sure you're never lonely again. Even if I have to come live with you." I froze for a second, unsure whether to laugh or cry. There was something so pure in his voice, so certain, that it nearly broke me. I held him close and said, "You just being here already makes me less lonely." He smiled, satisfied with my answer, and ran off toward the guest room, his footsteps light against the wooden floor. When the house grew quiet again, I sat back in my armchair and watched the reflection of the lamp flicker in the window. Outside, the first stars had begun to appear, scattered across the darkening sky, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of the silence pressing on me. Instead, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known I was missing, a reminder that love doesn't always come from where you expect it, but when it does, it changes everything. That night, before I went to bed, I whispered into the empty room, "Thank you, Daniel." Because somehow, that little boy had said what no one else could, and I knew it was just the beginning of something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, painting the wooden planks in stripes of gold and shadow. Daniel was already there, perched on the counter stool, swinging his legs, and munching on toast. His hair was still messy from sleep, and he had that way of looking around like he was discovering the world anew every day. I brewed my coffee, letting the rich aroma fill the room. There's something comforting about those quiet mornings, the ordinary rhythm of breakfast, the little sounds of home. But today, there was a subtle tension in the air, the kind that comes from a conversation you know is about to deepen. "Grandma," Daniel said, his mouth full, "can we go to the park later? I want to show you something." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Show me something? What is it? Is it a new trick with your skateboard?" He shook his head, a serious frown pulling at his little face. "No. I don't know how to explain it. You'll see." The mystery of it made me smile. Daniel always had a way of turning the simplest things into adventures. After breakfast, we walked to the park, the crisp autumn air brushing against our faces, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. The sky was an endless blue, and I noticed how Daniel's small hand fit perfectly into mine, warm and trusting. When we reached the old oak tree at the far end of the park, Daniel stopped and pointed. "Right there," he said, eyes wide. I followed his gaze and saw a tiny bird, a fledgling, perched on a low branch. Its feathers were ruffled, and it looked too young to be alone. Daniel knelt down beside it, his hands hovering, careful not to frighten the fragile creature. "See, Grandma," he whispered, "I found it yesterday. I think it's scared." I knelt beside him, feeling the cool grass beneath me. "You've got a gentle heart, Daniel," I said. "You want to help even the smallest things." He looked at me, and for a moment, the playful innocence of childhood melted into a quiet wisdom I didn't expect. "Grandma, sometimes I think, people are like this bird. They might look okay on the outside, but they're scared or lonely inside. And if someone doesn't notice, they might get hurt." I was taken aback. The depth of his words, coming from such a young boy, made me pause. How had he already started to see the world in this way? I reached over and squeezed his shoulder gently. "You notice a lot, don't you?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I notice you. I notice how quiet you get sometimes, and I don't want you to feel lonely like this bird." The metaphor, simple yet profound, tugged at something deep within me. I realized that he wasn't just talking about the bird or even me, but about understanding and empathy, about connecting with others in a way I hadn't seen in myself for years. We spent the morning carefully tending to the little bird. Daniel brought some water in a small bottle cap, and I found a soft leaf to make a makeshift nest in the grass. He whispered encouragements to the bird as though it were a dear friend. Watching him, I felt an overwhelming mixture of pride and awe. This child, so small in size, had such a large capacity for love and understanding. By the time we returned the bird to a safer branch higher up, Daniel looked at me, his eyes shining with a quiet excitement. "It's okay now, Grandma. It's not alone anymore." I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of the moment. "And neither am I," I whispered. As we walked back home, the leaves crunched beneath our feet, and the sun was starting its descent. I kept stealing glances at Daniel, noticing how he carried himself with a seriousness beyond his years, yet still had that innocent sparkle that made life feel lighter. That afternoon, he asked if we could sit on the porch and talk a bit more. We watched the world settle into early evening, the sky painting itself in streaks of pink and violet. And then he said something that made my heart skip, a simple question, yet one loaded with meaning. "Grandma, do you think people ever stop needing someone to just notice them?" I took a deep breath, trying to put into words what I felt. "I don't know if they ever stop," I said slowly. "But having someone notice, really notice, can make all the difference in the world." Daniel leaned back against the railing, thoughtful, then smiled softly. "Then I'll notice you. Always. I promise." It was a promise I felt in my bones, one that filled the spaces in my heart that had grown quiet over the years. And as the evening air cooled around us, I realized something remarkable, that a child's insight, his care, and his honesty could open doors in the soul I thought were long closed. The world had shifted slightly, just for us, in that quiet, golden hour. And I knew that these moments, this connection, this understanding, would linger, shaping both of us in ways we wouldn't fully understand for years to come. A few days later, the weather turned colder, the kind of crisp air that makes your lungs feel alive and your cheeks pink. Daniel and I had made it a little tradition to spend the late afternoons together, just talking or doing small projects around the house. That day, we decided to tackle the old photo albums tucked away in the cabinet above the bookshelf. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the window as I pulled them down. Daniel's curiosity was immediate. "Grandma, who's everyone?" he asked, flipping the first page of a faded photograph. I smiled at the old faces staring back at us, my parents, my husband, friends long gone. "These are people who shaped my life, Daniel. Some you'll never meet, but they're still part of who I am." He studied each photo carefully, tilting his head, pointing to faces, asking questions. "Did you really dance at that wedding?" he asked, pointing at a black and white picture of me twirling in a long dress, laughing. "Yes," I said, chuckling. "And I was terrible at it. But I laughed anyway." He laughed too, a soft, genuine sound, before turning to a picture of a younger version of me and my late husband. There was a gentle tension in his face, as though he was trying to understand a story that had layers he couldn't yet fully grasp. "Grandma," he said slowly, "did you ever feel scared to be alone?" The question startled me. I realized he had been watching more than he let on. "Yes, Daniel," I admitted. "Sometimes I did. But fear isn't the same as loneliness. Loneliness is a quiet ache you carry when there's no one really seeing you." He nodded thoughtfully, as if he had expected this answer, then said something that completely caught me off guard. "I don't want you to ever feel that way. Not even a little." His words weren't just an expression of affection, they were a conscious choice, a declaration that he was paying attention and that he cared. I felt a swell of emotion, the kind that makes your chest ache in a good way. We spent the afternoon going through the albums, telling stories about each person, laughing at funny memories, and occasionally falling silent when a memory carried too much weight. Daniel listened with an attentiveness I hadn't expected, sometimes asking questions that surprised me with their depth. When we got to the pictures of my own childhood, I noticed him leaning closer, his small hand brushing mine as he pointed to a photo of me with my younger brother. "Were you happy then?" he asked softly. I paused, considering the question. "I was, most of the time," I said. "But even happy moments have their shadows. That's why remembering is important, it helps us understand the light and the dark in life." Daniel nodded, but his expression held a quiet intensity, a focus I rarely saw in children. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I think I understand. You've felt both. And now I see why it matters that I notice you, too." I felt a lump rise in my throat. Here was this young boy, only 11, articulating thoughts about life, connection, and empathy in ways I had spent decades trying to express. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder gently. "You've got a wise heart, Daniel. Don't lose it." He smiled softly, and then, as if prompted by some sudden urge, he blurted out, "Grandma, can I make a promise to you?" "Of course," I said, intrigued. "Promise me that no matter what, you'll tell me when you're feeling lonely or sad. And I'll promise to always listen." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I held them back, not wanting to alarm him. I took his hands in mine, feeling their warmth, their strength, their sincerity. "I promise, Daniel," I said. "And I'll keep that promise, too." For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the sunlight in the room, the quiet ticking of the clock, the distant hum of life outside. It was just the two of us, connecting in a way that transcended age, words, and expectation. I realized then that these small promises, these shared moments of vulnerability, were what truly built the bonds that last a lifetime. As the afternoon faded into evening, Daniel helped me put the albums back in their cabinet, careful not to drop a single one. Then we moved to the porch to watch the sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and lavender. We sat side by side in silence, the kind that feels full, not empty. Then, in that quiet moment, he looked at me and said something that will remain with me forever. "Grandma, I think understanding people is like this sunset. You can't make it happen, but you can watch it, feel it, and learn from it. And I want to keep learning from you." I hugged him close, feeling the weight and warmth of those words. "And I'll keep learning from you, too, Daniel," I whispered. That night, as I closed the door to the guest room where he was sleeping, I stood for a moment, looking at the stars emerging in the sky. I realized that the most unexpected gifts often come from those we least expect. Children, with their clarity and honesty, can teach us more about connection, empathy, and love than we could ever imagine. And in that realization, I felt a profound gratitude, a sense that life had given me a second chance at being seen, understood, and cherished, and it all came from the little boy who simply wanted to notice me. Weeks passed, and our afternoons together became something I started looking forward to more than anything else. Daniel's visits were no longer just moments of shared time, they were the heartbeat of my days. That morning, the air was cool and crisp, a reminder that autumn was beginning to fade into winter. I made us hot chocolate and cookies, and he arrived with that familiar bright grin, carrying a small notebook tucked under his arm. "What's that?" I asked, curious. "My journal," he said, bouncing on his heels. "I've been writing down thoughts, about us, about people, about things I notice. I want to show you." I gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table, and he eagerly opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting and little sketches. There were drawings of our garden, the oak tree in the park, even small doodles of the two of us holding hands. And alongside these sketches were his reflections, small, precise sentences about kindness, noticing others, and understanding feelings. "Daniel," I said softly, feeling a lump form in my throat, "this is incredible. You've put so much thought into this." He looked at me with wide, honest eyes. "I wanted to show you how much I notice, Grandma. I don't want to forget anything about how important you are to me." His words hit me harder than I expected. Here was this boy, barely 11, expressing care and thoughtfulness in a way that many adults struggle to convey. I felt a swell of emotion, a mix of pride, love, and humility. We spent the morning reading through the journal together. He had written about our afternoons, the stories I had told him, and even the quiet moments when we had simply sat in silence. For each entry, he had drawn little hearts or stars, small signs of affection and attention. As I traced my fingers over his handwriting, I realized something powerful. This was more than a journal. It was a testament to empathy, understanding, and connection, the very things I thought had been lost to time. Then he looked up at me and said something I didn't see coming. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to help people feel seen. Like you've helped me, and like I hope I've helped you." I paused, searching for the right words. "Daniel, you already help people. Just by noticing, by listening, by caring, you make a difference every day." He smiled, a quiet, assured smile that carried a kind of wisdom I could hardly believe. "I think I understand now," he said. "People need to know they matter, even if it's just a little. And I want to make sure you always know that you matter to me." I felt tears welling up, but this time I let them fall. I pulled him close, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine, and whispered, "You've taught me more than I could ever teach you. I've felt seen, Daniel, and that's the greatest gift anyone could give me." We spent the rest of the day in quiet reflection, reading stories, sharing memories, and talking about dreams for the future. As the sun began to set, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and violet, I realized that our bond had deepened in a way I had never anticipated. The love, attention, and care from this young boy had filled spaces I didn't even know were empty. That night, after tucking him into bed, I sat alone in the living room, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the distant call of an owl. I reflected on the journey these past weeks had taken me on, the unexpected conversations, the shared moments of vulnerability, the deepening understanding between two generations. I realized that life has a way of surprising us, of teaching us lessons in the smallest voices and the simplest gestures. Daniel had reminded me that being noticed, being truly seen, is one of the most profound gifts we can offer one another. And in return, he had given me a sense of connection, of purpose, and of love that would linger long after the day ended. As I watched him sleep peacefully, I whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you, Daniel. You've given me a memory I will carry for the rest of my life. And in that moment, I understood something that I had always known deep down but had forgotten in the quiet years of adulthood. The heart has an incredible capacity to grow, to heal, and to connect, sometimes through the most unexpected teachers, in this case, my grandson, who had spoken words I would never forget and had reminded me what it truly means to be seen, understood, and loved. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, filled with gratitude, and ready to carry the lessons of Daniel's words into every part of my life. And I knew, with a certainty that felt both gentle and profound, that our bond, our shared memories, and the care we had given each other would continue to shape us, long into the future. This was more than a story of a day, a week, or even a season. It was a story of noticing, of connection, and of the quiet, extraordinary ways in which love and understanding can transform our lives forever.